They asked us to leave after our parents' funeral, unaware we've moved the house to a trust. What kind of uncles throw 3 grieving daughters out of their own home right after their parents' funeral? The sisters stood there in tears, their hearts shattered, their lives turned upside down. Instead of comfort, they were met with intimidation. Instead of family, they were treated like strangers. But that was only the beginning. Sometimes life has a way of turning tables when you least expect it. Sometimes the ones you try to cast aside are the very ones holding the power. This is the story of 3 young women, daughters who were mocked as helpless and hopeless, but who carried a secret that would leave their uncles speechless. And today, it is being retold by me. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. What kind of uncles throw 3 grieving daughters out of their home on the day of the funeral? The whisper carried across the cemetery like smoke. Nobody answered. People shifted under umbrellas, their black coats damp from steady rain. The caskets of Richard and Margaret Walker sat in the ground, the dirt still fresh, the air heavy with loss. 3 daughters stood at the edge, shoulder to shoulder. Emily, the eldest at 25, held herself upright though her hands shook in her gloves. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight as if strength alone would hold her together. Claire, 22, wept openly, wiping her face with her sleeve. Sophie, 18, clutched a framed photo of their family so tightly her knuckles whitened. The pastor closed his Bible. Richard and Margaret were pillars of this town. Faithful parents, loving neighbours. We commit them to the Lord. His voice broke slightly before fading into silence. People murmured, so sudden. A car accident. Both gone at once. The mourners trailed back to the Walker home for the reception. Inside, casseroles and pies lined the counters. The living room overflowed with neighbours, church members, and co-workers. On the walls hung family photos. Christmas mornings, birthdays, Richard in the yard with the grill, Margaret in the kitchen laughing. But nothing felt the same. The front door opened. In walked Thomas and Edward Walker, Richard's younger brothers. Thomas, tall and thin, wore a dark suit that looked expensive. His smile was smooth, but his eyes were cold. Edward, heavier, carried a Bible pressed to his chest like a badge. "Girls," Thomas said warmly, hugging Emily, kissing the air by her cheek. "You were graceful today. Your parents would be proud." Edward clapped Claire's shoulder. "The Lord gives and takes away, but family remains. We'll see to you now," Claire muttered under her breath. "Where were you when Mum was sick?" Emily nudged her sharply. "Not now." The reception dragged on. Guests spoke softly, ate little, patted the sisters' hands. Neighbours whispered sympathy, "Stay strong, we're here for you," but the girls barely heard. Meanwhile, the uncles mingled like hosts at their own party. Thomas told one neighbour, "Richard left a lot to manage, but don't worry. We'll take care of everything." Edward told another, "The girls shouldn't worry themselves with business. We'll shoulder that burden." Claire watched from across the room, fury simmering in her red-rimmed eyes. When the food grew cold and voices dulled, Thomas tapped his spoon against a glass. Tink, tink, tink. The room fell quiet. Edward stepped beside him, Bible on the mantel. "Family," Thomas said, voice calm but sharp. "Thank you for honouring my brother and his wife. But now that they are gone, matters must change." He looked directly at the 3 sisters. "This house is no longer yours. Pack your things and leave." The words cracked through the silence. Claire's mouth dropped. "What?" Emily's breath caught. "Uncle Thomas, this is our home." Edward spoke loudly so every guest could hear. "Your father trusted us. The estate carries mortgages, taxes, debts. This house is not your burden. We will handle it. Tonight, you must go." Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "How cruel, today of all days." Another muttered, "Shameful." Claire shouted, "You can't, we just buried them." "Control yourself," Edward snapped. "We're protecting you." Thomas's tone hardened. "Our decision is final. Each of you take a suitcase. Leave tonight." Emily's cheeks burned. She saw pitying stares, neighbors whispering behind hands. Humiliation pressed on her like stone. Beside her, Sophie leaned close, whispering quickly, "They don't know what Dad did." Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" "Later," Sophie whispered, clutching the photo tighter. The pastor cleared his throat. "Brothers, surely this talk can wait. These girls need—" Thomas cut him off. "Delays breed confusion. Order must be kept." Claire glared. "You mean your pockets must be filled?" Edward's face darkened. "Enough. Pack." And with that, the decision was sealed. They packed in silence. Emily folded sweaters and jeans into a suitcase, slipping her father's photo album inside. Claire threw clothes angrily into a bag, muttering, "They don't get my life," before shoving half her things back into drawers because the zipper stuck. Sophie packed slowly, placing her yearbook and family photo on top of her clothes. When they emerged into the hallway with their small suitcases, the uncles waited by the door. Neighbors stood quietly, ashamed to witness the humiliation. Some wiped tears. "Girls," Thomas said simply, extending his hand. "Keys." Emily froze. The keys felt heavy in her pocket. She remembered her father handing them to her after college. "You're the anchor, Emily. Keep us steady." Her throat burned as she placed them in Thomas's palm. Claire's eyes blazed. "You're proud of this? Throwing out your brother's daughters on the night you buried him?" Edward didn't flinch. "It's what must be done." The sisters stepped out onto the porch. Rain fell lightly, dampening their black clothes. The porch light glowed overhead, casting long shadows. Behind them, the door shut. Tools clinked inside, men already changing locks. "Where do we go?" Sophie asked softly. Emily steadied her voice. "We'll find a motel. Just tonight. Tomorrow we make a plan." The pastor pulled up in his car, rolling down the window. "Girls, let me take you." They slid into the back seat, suitcases on their laps. Emily looked back one last time. Through the glowing window, she saw Thomas twirl the keys in his hand and Edward talking smugly on his phone. The house, their home, was gone. At a roadside motel, the pastor paid the clerk, who handed them a room key with quiet sympathy. "2 beds," he said gently. "Pay later." Inside, the room smelled of lemon cleaner. The carpet was thin, the lamp flickered. It was nothing like home. Claire dropped onto a bed, face hot with tears. "I hate them," she said. Emily locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. "We'll call Mr. Harris tomorrow, Dad's lawyer. We'll find answers." Sophie placed the framed family photo on the nightstand. She looked at Emily and Claire, her voice quiet but firm. "They think they've won, but they don't know what Dad did." Emily stared at her. "What did he do?" Sophie shook her head. "Tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow, but he protected us. I heard him." Emily sat on the edge of the bed. Her chest still hurt, her heart still broke. But Sophie's words lit something faint inside her. Not hope, not yet, but a spark. She looked at her sisters. "We're not powerless. They just think we are." The 3 of them sat together. The photo between them. The rain whispering against the window. Grief weighed heavy. Humiliation burned fresh. But under it all, something stronger began to take root. "Tomorrow," Emily whispered. "We begin." And Sophie repeated softly, almost like a promise. "They don't know what Dad did." If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give future to children and women abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing to hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notification bell. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching us from and how this story hit home for you. From riches to rags in one night, That's what people said when the Walker sisters passed. Not loudly, not where Emily, Claire, or Sophie could hear, but in hushed voices that carried anyway. At the grocery store, in the pews, at church, in the school hallways. Everywhere, people whispered. Everyone knew the story. 3 daughters, parents buried, thrown out of their house before nightfall. The apartment they moved into was a far cry from the Walker home. The hallway smelled of cigarette smoke and bleach. The plaster walls were thin enough that they heard every upstairs argument, every slammed door, every burst of laughter. Emily slept on the couch so Claire and Sophie could share the 2 tiny bedrooms. The couch's springs bruised her back, but she never admitted it. She rose early every morning, made weak coffee and packed plain lunches. She told herself, keep steady. They need you to be steady. At the diner where she found work, Emily's days blurred together. Customers snapped their fingers and called her sweetheart. Her hands grew raw from washing dishes. Her uniform carried the permanent smell of grease, and her feet throbbed by nightfall. Sometimes she stood in the kitchen alone, gripping the counter, trying not to cry. Then she forced herself to smile again and carry on. Claire worked at a clothing store. Her boss, Mrs. Whitaker, was a hawk in high heels, sharp eyes always watching, sharp tongue always cutting. One afternoon, she leaned close while Claire folded sweaters. Life comes at you fast, doesn't it? From that big house on Maple Street to this. Must be humbling, folding clothes for strangers when you used to have everything. I'd be embarrassed. Claire's jaw tightened. I'm working. Isn't that what you pay me for? Mrs. Whitaker's lips curled. Don't get smart with me. You're lucky I hired you. A girl with your background. Most people wouldn't trust you with a cash register. People say your family wasted money. You should be grateful your uncles still show their faces in church. Claire dropped the folded sweater onto the pile. Maybe I should be grateful, or maybe I should remind people who really wasted money. But I'll save that story for when I quit. Her boss blinked in surprise, then smirked. Careful. You'll end up like your parents, too proud for your own good. Claire walked away, her blood burning. Sophie's school days were worse. Notes appeared on her locker. Poor little orphan rich girl. Girls whispered as she passed. Boys laughed too loudly, pointing at her worn-out shoes. At lunch, she often sat alone until a shy girl offered her half a sandwich. You okay? The girl asked. I'm fine, Sophie lied, though her throat ached. At night she cried silently into her pillow, clutching the photo of her family. Meanwhile, Thomas and Edward thrived. On Sundays they sat tall in the front pew at church, wives beside them, hands raised high. They donated loudly, made sure their names were read from the pulpit. After the service, people shook their hands and praised them. God bless you for taking care of your brother's girls. Thomas would sigh, sorrow painted on his face. It isn't easy, but family is duty. Edward would nod gravely. Pray for them, they're struggling. The congregation believed every word. Behind closed doors, greed ruled. Thomas met developers in steakhouses, boasting about how quickly Walker land could be sold. Edward met realtors, sliding forged papers across desks, selling off businesses Richard had built with decades of sweat. Their bank accounts fattened, their reputations soared, while the girls lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint. The hypocrisy cut deep. The worst wound came one grey Thursday afternoon. Claire, walking home from her shift, spotted Edward's shiny black car outside a cafe. She frowned and slowed. Through the window she saw him leaning across a table, smiling in a way she had never seen him smile at his wife. His hand covered another hand, a woman's. Her heart sank as she recognized her. Mrs. Caldwell. The same Mrs. Caldwell who had hugged them at the funeral, who had kissed their cheeks and whispered, I'm here for you, always. The same woman who had brought casseroles, who had prayed with them in the kitchen. Now she leaned close, whispering something that made Edward laugh. Claire froze, rage boiling inside her. She pressed herself against the window frame, trying not to be seen. Their voices floated just enough through the glass. Your nieces are pitiful, Mrs. Caldwell purred. Everyone feels sorry for them. If only they knew how foolish they really are. Edward chuckled. They're nothing without me, without Thomas. We're all they have. Claire's blood roared in her ears. She stumbled away from the cafe, fists clenched so tightly her nails cut her palms. That night, she stormed into the apartment. I saw him, she hissed. Edward, with Mrs. Caldwell, holding her hand, smiling, calling us pitiful. Emily nearly dropped the plate she was washing. Not her. Yes, her, Claire shouted. The woman who brought food after the funeral, the one who swore she cared. She's been sneaking around with him while his wife sings in church pews. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. How could she? Because people are liars, Claire spat. That's why. Emily set the plate down with trembling hands. We can't stay quiet. We have to confront them. A week later, she did. Edward's office reeked of cigars. Thomas sat in a leather chair, whiskey in hand. Edward leaned back behind his desk, smugness oozing from his smile. Emily stood straight, though her knees trembled. You've been selling Dad's properties, she said. And, Edward, I know about Mrs. Caldwell. Don't deny it. Claire saw you. She heard you call us pitiful. Thomas chuckled. Pitiful fits, doesn't it? Look at you. From Maple Street to a dump apartment. Pitiful is the word. Emily's breath caught, but she pressed on. Dad built those businesses with his hands. He trusted us with this family. You're destroying everything he left. Edward smirked. Richard trusted us, not you. You're children playing at adults. We're not children, Emily snapped. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes cold. You're nothing without us. Nothing. If you want help, beg. Get on your knees. Maybe then we'll toss you something. Otherwise, shut your mouth and go back to serving burgers. Emily's voice cracked. You're monsters. Edward raised his glass in mock salute. No, Emily. We're survivors. Learn the difference. Their laughter chased her out, slicing her dignity into pieces. That night she broke. She sat at the wobbly kitchen table, face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Claire rushed to her. Em! Emily lifted her face, streaked with tears. I can't do this. I can't keep us together. Everyone believes them. They have power, money, respect. We have nothing. I'm failing you. Don't say that, Claire cried. You're the only reason we're standing. Sophie wrapped her arms around Emily's waist. You're not alone, Em. You have us. But Emily shook her head. What do we have left? They took everything. Our home, our name, our dignity. They're laughing while we're begging. Claire's eyes filled with fire. Then we'll fight back. Somehow. Some way. We won't let them win. Emily's sobs grew harder. How? Tell me how, Claire. They own everything. We're nobodies now. Tell me how. Silence filled the room. Until Sophie whispered, maybe not. They turned to her. What do you mean? Emily asked. Sophie hesitated. She thought of her father's late-night talk with Mr. Harris, the lawyer. She remembered his voice. They won't touch my girls. Not while I'm alive. Not after I'm gone. And she remembered the brown folder tucked behind the books. She almost told them then, but instead she whispered, trust me. Just trust me. Later that night, when her sisters finally drifted into restless sleep, Sophie lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. Her heart raced. Then, slowly, she slipped out of bed, pulled on her jacket, and crept into the cold night. The Walker house loomed like a ghost, porch light dead, windows dark, the lawn overgrown. Her breath came fast as she crept around to the back door. It opened with a groan. Inside, the air smelled of dust and emptiness. Furniture gone, photos stripped, but her feet carried her to her father's study. Her flashlight beam swept across the shelves. The desk was bare, the drawers empty, her chest tightened. Then she saw it, the sliver of brown behind the books. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. The folder, she opened it, legal documents, stamped, signed. Her eyes widened with every line she read. The Walker house, the land, the businesses, all placed in a trust in the names of Emily, Claire, and Sophie Walker. Tears filled her eyes. Relief shook her shoulders. Her father had protected them. Even in death, he had made sure they were not powerless. Sophie pressed the folder to her chest, whispering into the dark. "Dad, you saved us." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. The uncles thought they had stolen everything, but they didn't know the truth. Not yet. Emily slammed the brown folder on the kitchen table so hard the plates rattled. Her voice shook with urgency. "We can't sit here anymore. Sophie found this. Dad protected us. This is the proof. The house is ours. Everything is ours. We take it to them tomorrow. We confront them and end this." Claire crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, her expression tight. Confront them? With what? March into their office waving a folder? Do you think they'll hand us the keys back with an apology? They'll laugh in your face, Em. They'll twist this like they twist everything. Emily spun toward her. And what's your brilliant plan? Sit in this dump while they sell every inch of our parents' lives? They're already bragging about deals. If we wait, we'll lose it all. Claire's eyes blazed. No, if we rush, we'll lose it all. You always think charging in fixes things, but it doesn't. It gets us hurt. Emily's fists tightened. You're saying I'm reckless? I'm saying you don't think. Claire snapped. You act like you're the only one carrying the weight. We lost Mom and Dad too, Emily. You're not the only one grieving. Emily's voice cracked, but her anger didn't fade. Then act like it matters. You talk about strategy, but all I see is fear. Maybe you don't care enough to fight. Claire's face twisted in rage, her voice breaking. Don't you dare! Don't you dare say I don't care. I was the one holding Mom's hand when she could barely breathe. I was the one who sat outside Dad's study night after night because I was scared of losing him. Don't tell me I don't care. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. She clutched the folder to her chest and cried out, Stop! Please stop! This is what they want. For us to fight each other. Dad trusted us to be together, not tear each other apart. Emily and Claire froze, both breathing hard, guilt flickering in their faces. Silence stretched in the room, broken only by Sophie's shaky breaths. Finally, Emily sank into a chair, her voice low. I can't watch them take everything. Claire swallowed hard. And I can't watch us destroy ourselves trying to fight too soon. Sophie hugged the folder tighter. Then we have to find the right way. Together. Across town, Thomas and Edward were already plotting their next move. Late at night in Thomas's office, papers lay spread across the desk. Deeds, contracts, signatures forged with practiced precision. A developer leaned back in his chair, pen tapping against the wood. So once the paperwork clears, the Maple Street property is ours. Thomas's smile was thin and sharp. Ours to sell, yours to build. The girls don't have a chance. Orphans never do. Edward chuckled, sipping his whiskey. And the town loves us. We're the grieving uncles, the guardians. By the time those girls figure out what's happening, no one will believe them. The developer signed the contract. Betrayal sealed in ink. But Edward's wife, Linda, wasn't blind. For weeks she had grown uneasy with his late nights and secretive calls. That evening, as she walked past his study, she paused. His voice floated through the crack in the door. Those foolish girls don't even know the trust exists. We've already stripped half the assets. And Mrs. Caldwell? She's more loyal than my wife ever was. Linda's stomach dropped. Her hands trembled as she pressed them over her mouth. The words stabbed deep. Betrayal as a wife, betrayal as an aunt, by marriage to those grieving girls. She stepped back quietly, her face pale, but her heart hardening. From that night forward, whenever Edward left papers unattended, Linda slipped them into her purse. Quietly, secretly, building her own arsenal of truth. Days later, Thomas spotted Sophie leaving school. He waved, smiling warmly. Sophie, dear, how are you? You've grown thinner. School must be stressful. Sophie hesitated, clutching her backpack. It's fine. He smiled kindly, but his eyes were sharp. I could help. Your sisters don't always make the best choices, but you're smart. Bright future. You deserve better than struggling in that apartment. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Here, some papers, just a signature, and I can make sure you have money for college. Books, tuition, whatever you need. You wouldn't have to worry anymore. Sophie frowned. What kind of papers? Formalities, Thomas said smoothly. Estate matters. Your father trusted me. Shouldn't you? You'd be helping your sisters by easing the burden. Her fingers brushed the pen he held out. His smile widened, gentle but pressing. Come now, one signature, and all your troubles fade. Don't you want to rise above this mess? Her hand trembled. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Never sign what you don't understand, Sophie. Ever. She pulled back sharply, shaking her head. I need to ask Emily. The warmth in Thomas's smile flickered, revealing the cold beneath. Of course, but think quickly. Opportunities vanish, and you may not get another chance. He slipped the envelope back into his coat and walked away, his eyes dark with disappointment. Sophie's legs shook all the way home. That night, Emily insisted they visit Mr. Harris, their father's old lawyer. They carried the folder like treasure. Mr. Harris, a grey-haired man with kind eyes, welcomed them. Your father was a good man, he said softly. I've been worried about you girls. Emily explained everything, her words tumbling fast. Sophie placed the folder on the desk. Mr. Harris opened it with careful hands. His eyes scanned the pages, his face softening as he read. When he looked up, his voice trembled. Your father was wise. This trust, it's airtight. No one can touch the house, the land, or the businesses. They belong to you three, jointly. He locked it down against interference. Thomas and Edward can't undo this. Emily's eyes filled with tears. So it's real. We still have something. Mr. Harris nodded. More than something. You have protection. But understand, your father didn't just leave you property. He left you unity. He wrote this trust so no one person could break it alone. He wanted you bound together so no wedge could divide you. He trusted your bond, not their promises. Claire swallowed hard. Then we can't let them tear us apart. Mr. Harris leaned forward. But remember, greedy men don't stop because the law says so. They'll twist lies, use people, destroy reputations. You must be ready for that fight. Dignity is harder to defend than property, but you must hold both. The sisters left his office holding the folder tightly, a spark of hope lighting their chests. For the first time since the funeral, they felt the possibility of justice. But hope doesn't go unnoticed. That evening, Emily's phone buzzed with a new message. The number was unknown. She opened it, and her stomach dropped. If you show those papers, we'll ruin your reputation. No one will marry you. No one will hire you. Everyone will believe us, not you. Emily's hands shook as she read it aloud. The words echoed through the small apartment. Claire's eyes blazed with fury. Cowards! They can't touch us legally, so now they'll try to destroy us personally. Sophie's face went pale. What if they do? What if no one believes us? Emily stared at the message, her chest heavy with fear. Then this fight won't just be about the house anymore. It'll be about our names, our dignity. The room went silent, the weight of the threat pressing down. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, as if the night itself warned them of the storm to come. The Walker house glowed that night, but it wasn't the warm glow it once carried when Richard and Margaret were alive. It wasn't the smell of Mom's roast chicken or the sound of Dad's deep laugh echoing in the halls. It was a hollow glow, expensive chandeliers lit for show, polished silver trays lined with food, glasses of champagne clinking as relatives and neighbours gathered to celebrate what Thomas and Edward called a new chapter for the family. Cars lined Maple Street. Men in suits and women in fine dresses stepped out and whispered at the sight of the three sisters standing stiffly by the doorway. They came? One woman murmured, tugging at her husband's sleeve. Why would they show their faces now? Her husband smirked. Curiosity, maybe. Or desperation. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with smugness. Laughter rang out, the kind that was meant to sting. In the corner, two cousins whispered loud enough to be overheard. Such a shame. They couldn't even keep their parents' house. Another added with a laugh. Orphans don't prosper. Everyone knows that. Emily heard every word. Claire's nails dug into her palm, and Sophie squeezed her sister's arm. They're waiting for us to break, Sophie whispered, her eyes glistening. Thomas stood near the fireplace, tall and polished in a dark suit, his silver tie pin gleaming. He raised his glass, tapping it gently with a spoon. The chatter stilled. His voice carried smoothly, like a politician on stage. Family, friends, neighbours. Tonight we honour my late brother Richard and his beloved wife Margaret, and we mark the successful transition of their estate. He paused as though grief choked him, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. It wasn't easy, so much responsibility, so many burdens. But Edward and I have carried them as best as we could. Tonight, we announce that the Maple Street house has been sold to a fine developer. Richard's legacy will continue under strong hands. Polite applause broke out. Edward stepped forward, puffing his chest. It's what Richard would have wanted. His daughters are young, grieving. They couldn't possibly shoulder such weight. This way they are spared, and we, as guardians, have ensured stability. Snickers scattered through the crowd. They couldn't even hold their own house, a neighbour whispered. So pitiful. Another said more loudly, from riches to rags in one night. That's what happens when children try to act like adults. Claire's face burned. Sophie lowered her head, tears threatening to spill. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought her chest might burst. Edward lifted his glass higher. So, let us raise a toast. To Richard's daughters, who must now find their own way in life, with God's help, of course. His lips curled as he said it. The room broke into laughter. That's when Emily stepped forward. Stop. The word cut like a blade. Laughter died. Heads turned. The silence that followed was heavier than the chandelier above. Thomas's smile faltered. Emily, he said smoothly, what a surprise. You've grown bold. Emily's hands trembled at her sides, but her voice was firm. Bold enough to tell the truth. This house was never yours to sell. You didn't save our father's legacy, you tried to steal it. Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, what did she say? Another muttered, nonsense. Thomas chuckled. Steal? My dear, don't embarrass yourself in front of all these people. The sale is final. The papers are signed. Emily's throat felt tight, but she reached into her bag and pulled out the brown folder. Her father's handwriting marked the corner. She held it high. Not these papers. These are the ones that matter. My father placed this house and other assets in a trust. A trust under our names. It was never yours. It was never for you to touch. The room erupted in murmurs. Relatives craned their necks. Neighbours leaned forward. A trust? Could it be true? Edward barked a laugh, too loud, too forced. Lies! That's a trick. Some scraps of paper those foolish girls scribbled. Do you really think anyone here will believe them over us? Emily's voice wavered but didn't break. Believe it or not, it's real. The front door opened. Every head turned. Mr. Harris, their father's lawyer, stepped inside. His grey hair shone in the light, his presence calm but heavy with authority. It is real, he said, his voice steady. I drew up the trust myself. It is airtight. This house, this land, the accounts, they belong to Emily, Claire, and Sophie Walker, not Thomas, not Edward. The law is clear. Gasps turned into a wave of voices. Relatives muttered in outrage. Neighbours whispered furiously. So it's true. They lied to all of us. Thomas's face went crimson. This is outrageous. You come into my house. But another voice cut through, sharp and trembling. Your house? Linda, Edward's wife, stepped into the centre of the room. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, but her eyes burned with fury. In her hands, she clutched a stack of papers. You want to talk about outrageous? She spat. How about the nights you spent with Mrs. Caldwell while I sat alone at home? How about the money you bragged about stealing from these girls? Edward's face drained of colour. Linda, not now. But Linda's voice only grew louder. Oh yes. Now you thought I didn't hear you, didn't you? You thought I wouldn't find the notes, the receipts, the whispers you left carelessly behind. But I did. Every cruel word, every lie, every insult about these girls, about me. Gasps rippled. People turned to Mrs. Caldwell, who stood near the back, her face white, her body trembling. Someone hissed, "Shame." Linda held up a crumpled note, her voice breaking. He called me a fool. He called these girls pitiful. He laughed at us all while sneaking around like a coward. And tonight, everyone knows. Edward stammered. Linda, please, we can talk about this. Talk, she shouted, her voice cracking. You mocked me. You mocked these girls. You mocked your own brother's memory. No more talking. Tonight you face what you've done. The crowd erupted. Neighbors muttered, Disgusting! Adulterer! Thief! Relatives shook their heads. One aunt said bitterly, I remember Richard begging him to visit when Margaret was sick. He never came. Thomas tried to salvage control. He raised his hands, his voice booming. Listen, these girls are manipulating you. Linda is emotional. This is nothing but a spectacle. Enough! Mr. Harris's voice thundered as his hand slammed the table. The room fell silent. The trust is valid. The evidence of betrayal is clear. Richard's legacy belongs to his daughters. And you two are finished. The tide had turned. The same crowd that had whispered against the sisters now applauded. They clapped, they nodded, they murmured words of respect. Brave girls! Their father would be proud. Justice at last. Thomas and Edward stood stiff, their pride shattering, their empire collapsing in front of the very people they had manipulated. Emily stepped forward, her heart hammering but her voice steady. She held the folder high. Her eyes swept the room, the neighbors who had pitied them, the relatives who had mocked them, the uncles who had betrayed them. You threw us out after our parents' funeral, she said, her voice rising with every word. You mocked us, you humiliated us, you made us beg, but our father raised us to rise, not to crawl. This house isn't just bricks, it's our dignity, and you can't steal that. The silence that followed lasted only a breath before applause erupted. Louder than the uncle's laughter had ever been, louder than the whispers that had haunted the sisters for weeks. People clapped, cheered, even shouted their support. Claire's eyes shone with fire as she gripped Emily's arm. Sophie squeezed her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks but her smile radiant. The three stood together, taller than they had ever stood. The crowd surrounded them now, not to mock but to honor, and the uncles, once kings of the room, were left staring at the ruins of their greed. For the first time since their parents' death, the sisters felt not just relief, but triumph. They had taken back not only their house, but their dignity, their honor, their father's trust. And as Emily looked around the room, the weight of her words echoed in the silence that followed the applause. They can take nothing more. We are not victims. We are our father's daughters.